In Washington, House Republicans introduced 8 bills today which are intended to phase out Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac for good. Joining us right now to help fill us in on today's legislative developments is the man that's leading the efforts, Congressman Scott Garrett of New Jersey. Congressman, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us on Street Smart. Let me ask you first of all, because I find this to be very interesting, but also fairly complex. I did notice as I was buying a house last year that the FHA has started to put out massive loans for almost no down payments at very little interest rates. Is the FHA in effect taking up the slack for the inventory that's not going to be able to be held at Fannie and Freddie?
Well, sure, and that's a real concern that we have, and that was a question that we've been looking at for some time. Because what you don't want to do, of course, is say, here you have Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the GSEs. They were an underlying cause of a large part of the cause of the crisis in '08. So we're going to try to wind them down on the one hand, and then just like with a balloon, sort of push everything over to the FHA. So whatever we do in committee and then on the House and then eventually out of Congress has to be in a coordinated manner so that so the FHA doesn't just begin to assume all that as well.
Congressman Garrett, so many questions come up when we talk about this issue.
Okay.
Let's talk about the phase-out process. How long do you envision this could take to actually phase out Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac?
Yeah, so we're not putting, as we come out here today with these 8 bills, we're not putting a hard and fast number on that today. We realize
why are we not doing that? Is it because it's impossible to at this point, or why not?
That's probably part of it. I mean, and your last report just leading into this one was pointing out that we still have, well, real questions, real concerns, real fragility in the housing market right out there today. And so that, for some who would say, well, if we just eliminate the GSEs today and create the private sector today, would that be good? Well, you can't. The private sector would not come in that quickly if we just did it just today like this. And there is the fragile market out there as well. So what we can do instead is to realize those potential problems of moving in a pace that is not appropriate and come up with legislation that is on the same page as the administration in their white paper, and we can probably move through the House, get in the Senate, get signed, and put into place legislation that would then send the appropriate signals to the marketplace that, hey, they're going to be on the same proverbial level playing field initially with the GSEs, and the private sector can get back into this market then.
And you do work along the lines, you mentioned the white paper, of the recommendations that were sent to Congress by the Treasury Department and Housing and Urban Development. Is the idea to switch over completely to a private market? Because a lot of people would say, why have the Department of Housing and Urban Development? It's just usurping $30 billion a year and doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, there you go. So, so with regard to the GSEs, Fannie and Freddie, our goal is to, just what the administration says, is to wind them down and to move that whole marketplace that was over here in the GSEs and move it into the private marketplace and allow that to flourish and grow back up and assume it. And be in a place in this country where, well, a lot of other countries are. Europe, Canada right now, north next door, they never had a GSE apparatus like we have here. And you saw that their housing market had some difficulties, but certainly not to the scale that we'd had here. So this is a case where we don't need it, we don't want to have it, and the administration's on the same page that we've been on for my last 8 years in Congress. So that's the steps we want to move in that direction.
Representative Garrett, in terms of the bills introduced today, apparently you guys didn't lower conforming loan limits. I mean, why isn't that part of the move here?
Well, so what we did today was to say at the outset this is just the beginning of the process. This is where we're going to go and say, here are the 8 bills that we have here, step 1, if you will, and we will be having additional laying out of additional pieces of the matrix of trying to get to where we said we want to get to. Conforming loan limits is just one of those elements in order to get there. We had this issue in the past and discussed, and we'll address it in the future.
All right. Certainly lots and lots to talk about, and I know you guys are just getting started. Representative Garrett, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.